I never recommend not to buy a book, but please don't buy this book. Hi everyone, welcome back to John Florio channel. My name is Mary and I am an expert on John Florio. In my last video I talked about John Florio and his relationship with Shakespeare and how sadly today there are some old legends and speculation that still survive and we see it on TV. But the real question is, why this connection? Why Florio has been so often connected to Shakespeare and his works? Today I want to show you all the biographies that have been published about John Florio. And I'll show you how, from the very beginning, they focus on this relationship. I have read them all. I have read all the books on this earth about John Florio. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe and help me grow this channel. Now, let's start. The very first book that analyzed John Florio's life and works was published by Chlara Longworth de Chambran. She was a Shakespeare scholar, and in her book Giovanni Florio, un époque de la Renaissance à l'époque du Shakespeare, she wrote 2 chapters. The first is a short bio of John Florio without any new document but focused her attention on his works. And the second chapter is dedicated to his relationship with Shakespeare. Chambran wrote some false speculations as well, like the legend of Holofernes, basing her book on prior conspiracy theories made by Shakespeare scholars. So her biography was slightly based on bias and should be read with a grain of salt. But overall, she was the very first author who pointed out Florio's great impact on English language and literature and his friendship connection with Shakespeare, doing a comparison with Florio's proverbs and Shakespeare's proverbs, John Florio's dialogues and Shakespeare's dialogues, and how they created words, wordplay, puns. So as you can see from the very first biographies on John Florio, his scholars focused their attention on his relationship with Shakespeare. The second scholar, and still today the most important, was Frances Amelia Yeats. She published a couple of years later, after Chambran's book, John Florio, The Life of an Italian Shakespeare, England. She discovered a great deal of documents about John Florio's years at the French embassy with Giordano Bruno, or when he worked as groom of the private chamber with Queen Anne of Denmark, and made an exhaustive analysis of his work. Is the book perfect? No. She also made some mistakes. For example, she asserted that Florio's wife was some of Daniel's sisters, and others, like his relationship with Thomas Nash. Yeats asserted that Florio and Nash were friends, but this is wrong. Probably Nash was Florio's greatest enemy, and she tried to befriend them, when in reality their quarrel can be traced in everything the two men published during their career. She also brought some speculations that, in my opinion, are wrong, but overall this book is still today the Bible for those who want to approach to John Florio. The funny thing is that in this book, in the back, by her reconstruction of Florio's life and character, Frances Yeats' 1934 text throws light upon the vexed question of his relations with Shakespeare. The funny thing is that she basically writes just a couple of pages about Florio and Shakespeare. In the last chapter, titled Conclusion, Florio and Shakespeare, she writes, "The way is now clear for an entirely fresh consideration of the whole problem of Florio's relations with Shakespeare." So she wrote basically 3 pages on this topic. I am very certain that initially the last chapter included more than just 3 pages about Florio and Shakespeare. I'm very certain that she wanted to write a second book on this topic. Problem is that she never did it. And actually it's after this book published A Study in Love, Labus, Laws, in which she portrayed Florio not as the great author she had described in her first book, but as the old pedant Holofernes, basically doing a step back and fostering the old speculations and false legends made on Florio that she didn't approve of in the first book. If you delete the false speculations she writes, the whole book is basically an analysis of how Love, Labus, Laws, Shakespeare's play, contains many references to both John Florio and Giordano Bruno. Anyway, later there was an Italian who published a book in which he basically translated Yeat's book from English into Italian. I'm not kidding. Yeah, he plagiarized Yeat's book. I never recommend not to buy a book, but please don't buy this book. He also added some wrong pictures, like this one. This is not Queen Anne, this is Queen Victoria.
This is not Queen of Denmark.
Oh my god. In the last chapter of this book, he also wrote a chapter on Shakespeare and Florio. And he wrote something like, yeah, Florio was the pedant Holofernes, Shakespeare loved to mock him, ha ha ha. Don't buy it. There are also new editions of John Florio's work that have been published through the centuries. The first book is by Arundel de Rey. Arundel de Rey is probably my favorite Florio scholar. He was the son of an Irish mother and an Italian father and was lecturer in Italian at Oxford University. He published a new edition of Florio's First Fruits, his first work, by providing significant further information and analysis on John Florio's personality and career, and a good deal of it corrected to Yeats. De Rey is one of my favorite scholars of John Florio because he didn't write like speculation, he was actually able to give a complete objective portrait of Florio's strong, bizarre and passionate personality. So as you can see, it is very hard to find a good study on John Florio without the typical fog of lies that characterize his biographies. Hermann Haller is another great scholar. He is professor of Italian at Queen's College and has published a new edition of A World of Words, Florio's first Italian-English dictionary, with a great introduction on the life and works of John Florio. I strongly recommend this book. He points out John Florio's creativity in borrowing from Italian, Latin, Spanish, French to create new words in English. Charles Simonini is an American scholar who published a new edition of Florio's Second Fruits with a beautiful introduction in which he underlines the similarities between Shakespeare's dialogues and Florio's dialogues, Shakespeare's proverbs and Florio's proverbs. He also points out that John Florio's library contains those books, those sources that Shakespeare used in his works, like the comedies, the tragedies, Bandello, Catomiti, Inganni, and many others. and he portrays Florio as one of the most important humanists in Renaissance England. Other books have been published and they focus on Florio's life and works, and they basically follow two different paths. Those who exclude any relationship between Florio and Shakespeare, and those who promote this relationship. This is mostly promoted by Italian authors, Panzieri, Gerevini, Tassinari. Panzieri wrote two biographies, one on Michelangelo Florio, John Florio's father, and another on Michelangelo and John. Vito Costantini, a book in both Italian and English about Florio as Shakespeare. Saul Gerevini, a book in Italian in which he promotes a collaboration between Florio and Shakespeare. Tassinari is probably the most famous. He is an Italian professor who lives in Canada. He relates Florio's life and works to Shakespeare by doing a step-by-step analysis of his influence in Shakespeare's works. Despite others, Tassinari doesn't give Shakespeare any role. I don't think he believes Shakespeare existed at all. Lately, other books have been published with the same war. Florio against Shakespeare, Florio and Shakespeare, Florio has Shakespeare, blah blah blah. Probably one of the latest is by Carla Rossi, who has found a new document regarding Florio's family, the name of his wife, and that in the first years of his career he worked as dyer. She doesn't focus much on his personality or his works, but on this new document, and she rejects any involvement by Florio in Shakespeare's works. And here we come to my favorite after Under the Ray. Ta-da! Michael Wyatt. Despite the whole book is not about Florio, but it's the second part of the book about Florio from pages 157 to pages 244. Why I love this book? Well, for many reasons. Wyatt has cleverly pointed out important facts about Florio's personality and career that haven't been underlined by his previous scholars. A new, deeper analysis of his first and second works, and I love how he understands Florio's personality through the epistles to the reader that Florio wrote in his works. I also love the way he analyzed his dialogues and his liminal position as Englishman in Italian, which gave him many problems due to the xenophobic environment in London at the time. Other Shakespeare scholars have focused on John Florio, either discussing his translation of Montaigne essays and the influence of these works in Shakespeare's plays, or defining John Florio intermediary between Shakespeare and the Italian sources used in his plays. Recently I have read very interesting books about Shakespeare, in which Florio is finally portrayed without the bias and speculation I have mentioned in the past, but actually recognizing a beautiful influence of Florio in Shakespeare's works. This, the plain truth. Is it that hard to say it? This year another book has been published, and it was written by me. Okay, it's a little book, but I think it could be interesting, since I have studied a new field of research, that is Florio's activity as a poet. I have analyzed poems he wrote in both Italian and English, and show his beautiful style that reveal what a great poet he was, although he preferred to write them anonymously. And I am currently writing my second book, but this is a surprise, and I hope that you like it when and if I publish. There are also novels about John Florio written in Italian, English, French. Let's start from Anna Cuneo. Un Monde de Mots is a beautiful novel in French in which Anna Cuneo portrays Florio as a talented man obsessed by words, puns, wordplay, and how the different European languages, literature, and culture influenced him. Cuneo writes about the religious wars, Montaigne, also Shakespeare. It's a rich and exciting historical novel. Shakespeare in Fulham is a script in which Froyo is portrayed as Shakespeare. If you like this genre and topic, you can buy it. It describes Froyo as Shakespeare in collaboration with Ben Jonson, Marlowe, Bruno, Sidney, Spies, Walsingham, Cecil, Rosencrantz, blah blah blah. There is also a small, very small book written by an American fan of Florio, and it's titled Crowdsourcing Shakespeare, the search for John Florio's library. And he promotes an interesting way to search for John Florio's library. His 400 books sadly disappeared and nobody knows where they are today, although I have found Florio's copy of Montaigne and Cervantes' work. Paone believes that the books that Florio owned were the sources for Shakespeare's plays and could contain important information, annotation, so check it if you like this topic. So as you can see, from the very first biography of John Florio, it was underlined his connection, friendship, relationship with Shakespeare. Through the years, this topic has been analyzed by various scholars, academics, passionate fans who have written their own idea on this subject. So those who condemn any relationship between Florio and Shakespeare are lying, because from the very first books about this man it was pointed out that he had a connection, relationship, I don't know how you want to call it, with the bard. Of course, I also agree that this subject has also been overstressed and not discussed seriously, as I have mentioned in the last video, with people asserting absurd suggestions and conspiracy theories. If I had to suggest you a book about John Florio, I would recommend its book if you don't know anything about him and you want to start acquiring some basic information, and of course, Wyatt. Anyway, my website resolutejohnflorio.com contains thousands of pages about Florio's life and works. They are free, you can read everything and get a lot of information about Florio's life and work without spending any money. So that's it. I hope that you liked this video. Let me know if you have comments, questions, suggestions. Don't forget to subscribe and stay resolute. Bye!